Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our program today. We will be discussing the effective strategies that we can employ and behavioral norms to help deepen and develop greater capacity for anti-racism work and allyship, with a focus on white allyship at UC San Diego. Our campus continues to make great strides amidst the social, political, and economic challenges of our time. And the Vice Chancellor Office for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion is pleased to be a partner with many of you in achieving our institutional goals. We're glad you've joined us today. Today's program promises to be stimulating and enriching. As a reminder, you may submit your questions utilizing the Q&A function on your Zoom control panel. Now, I would like to introduce the Vice Chancellor for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, Dr. Becky Pettit. Welcome, Dr. Pettit.
Good afternoon, everyone. I begin my comments with the words of the great James Baldwin, who said, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." At UC San Diego, we are facing our responsibility to address systemic racism. Today's conversation with Dr. Obear is part of a comprehensive allyship and accountability initiative where we partner with our white colleagues to have consciousness-raising, equity-minded, and courageous conversations about not just ending systems of inequality and oppression, but working toward our collective liberation. The recent events in our country have demonstrated the profound importance and the urgency of our need to address structural inequality and pervasive racism in our country and in our own institutions. We each have a role to play in working toward a future where racism no longer exists and people of color no longer have to endure soul-crushing and deadly violence. While this is a time of great tragedy in our nation, it is also an opportunity for radical transformation. As you take part in today's webinar, I encourage you to make your participation count. Pay attention to the ways that we as individuals have been complicit in systemic racism, and listen for ways where you can positively interrupt racism and take action within your own spheres of influence. Today's conversation is designed to complement your ongoing learning and to help activate personal accountability for creating a more racially just campus environment. I now introduce our featured speaker, Dr. Kathy Obear, President of the Center for Transformation and Change. In the interest of time, I'll read an abbreviated version of her biography, and you can read the longer version on our website. Dr. Kathy Obear is a nationally recognized expert in helping leaders, change agents, and facilitators develop the capacity to create equitable, inclusive, racially and socially just organizations. She is a co-founder of the Social Justice Training Institute, which is an intensive professional development experience designed to deepen capacity to dismantle dynamics of racism and white supremacy in ourselves and in our organizations. Welcome, Dr. Kathy Obear.
Vice Chancellor Pat, I am so excited to be here. I'm Kathy Obear. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm here in Denver, Colorado, the unceded lands of the Arapaho, Ute, Cheyenne, and Sioux. I invite you all to take a deep breath. I am deeply honored and humbled, grateful to be here because I have such deep respect for the work of UCSD over the years, and specifically the vision of anti-racism, developing internal capacity, particularly of whites, to step up and do our part to really do transformational change. And I loved Liberation, anti-racist organization. And so how do we develop our capacity to dismantle racism, racially just, racially inclusive? And the key question is why now? But for me, as I heard my friend Christine Saxman on public radio, her question was, how come not? More people are doing it in the face of so much evidence, so many decades of reports, so many open forums, so many calls over decades from our BIPOC students, staff, and faculty. Why do so many whites and maybe some other leaders not center dismantling racism, creating anti-racism in everything we do proactively. Since the murder of George Floyd, a renewed call for racial justice, racial reckoning, our students, staff, and faculty of color on our campuses are demanding once again, imploring for real change now. The data continues to show devastating racial disparities on every level, every department, every type of division. And our colleagues of color have been speaking up career impacting risks to raise issues, call in, call out, and yet we continue to fall short. Our leaders of color are exhausted. The folks I've been talking to were exhausted long before the pandemic, after a year in, double exhausted, deep gaps in services that were made so apparent with the pandemic and how we serve students, staff, and faculty. And then the BLM Black Lives Matter protests this summer, the campus protests, the violent attempted coup, and the clear discrepancy on how those were treated differently. I was talking to Becky, your peer, at another institution about your size, and she told the story, an African-American woman, how she was at the mailbox and a white woman neighbor came up and she said, "I got to talk to you." She said, "I was wrong. You were right. I see it now. When I was watching January 6th and I saw how those violent white supremacist protesters in quotes, invaded the Capitol violently, how they were treated by police, and then remembering all of the different protests for racial justice, I saw finally the discrepancy that you've been talking about. And how many of you all have realized there are many people in your lives that are saying now, I finally hear, I finally see. We have this window of opportunity, and I don't know how big it is, but I think there are more and more whites in our families, on campus, in our communities, that realize we have to do something more, we have to participate, we have to do our part. But I don't know how long this window of opportunity will stay open. I don't know if y'all had a chance today to hear President Biden, his call for racial equity, naming systemic racism, naming the need to dismantle white supremacy, proactively called for every part of the government to address racial equity, whether it's in housing, COVID, climate, law enforcement, education, economic recovery, jobs, voting, breathe, all aspects of government. That's what UCSD is saying. All of us have responsibility in everything we do to have a racial equity, racial justice, anti-racism lens in everything we do. But the truth is, if I had been on campus as I was when I was in residence life, I would not have voluntarily come to this. I would have thought, I know it all. I studied it. I read a lot. I wouldn't have signed up unless I was performing, unless I wanted my colleagues of color to see me so I could wear that badge of white ally, so I could have that identity instead of living it in my daily practice. So what I want to share with you is, over the decades, what I have been learning, and I still forget too often, and I am needing to continue to learn. And in the packet, there are all kinds of definitions, and there's so many more online, that race is a social construct, that in fact it's made up. And I didn't used to believe that. I thought race was real. I thought there were distinct races. I was taught that, and that we had different capacities. What I didn't realize until I've been researching more and been to the Equal Justice Initiative Legacy Museum with Brian Stevenson and done some other reading, is how this idea of race and white supremacy was used to justify the Atlantic slave trade, the enslavement of millions, the racial terrorism over the centuries, to justify manifest destiny. That's what we called it, colonization, the slaughter, enslavement, forced removal, genocide of indigenous peoples that still is going on. And that ideology of white supremacy. I thought white supremacists were the KKK. I grew up in the 60s outside of DC. And so I watched on TV, Bull Connor and all these whites being violent. And I read enough in history because I studied it in college. But I never thought there was this ideology, this belief that actually whites are superior, folks of color, indigenous folks are subhuman. And it hurts my stomach to say it. And yet that is what I absorbed in racialized socialization. Undeserving, here to serve, exploitable. We deserve everything as whites. We can have everything. I thought white supremacy was those few people going on the Capitol. And yet if anybody watched January 6th or the footage since, and white folks, if you tried to distance yourself That's part of the problem. Instead of saying, how have I been socialized with similar racist ideas? I may not have that behavior, but how do I show up not supporting anti-racism, colluding, being passive, and racist microaggressions, as well as policies and practices? What I didn't know is that all these racist stereotypes and prejudice that I believed then and now that are still in me, I just fought. I'm like, I'm not racist. I don't have. White allies recognize the racist socialization, the racist attitudes and behaviors we still struggle to not act out of, and to realize that racism is real and here. You know, before I thought to have a racist behavior, you had to be intentional, blatant, violent, and come out of hatred. This white supremacy attitude of whites are better, that I didn't have an understanding. And so, of course, people that did racist things were bad people, and I was the good white. But it's prejudice plus power. Whoops. So these attitudes of whites are better, people of color aren't, there's racist stereotypes towards folk of color, indigenous folks, plus the power to institutionalize it into laws, practices, policies that maintain the status quo where whites get privilege and folks of color have incredible barriers to success. Growing up, I thought, yeah, okay, racism exists in the past, maybe a little today, but not in my neighborhood, not in my family, not in me. But since Ferguson, the murder of George Floyd, I'm learning a lot more about dynamics of racism and even anti-Blackness. And Ta-Nehisi Coates, this quote, and I'll read it in case you're on a phone, is gut punch to me, because this is the truth about what I have believed and struggle against. And I think that's true for many of us. If there's one thing missing in our country, it's an acknowledgement of the broad humanity of Black folks, that racism and anti-Black racism in particular is a belief there's something wrong with Black people. I grew up believing in that deficit model. Blacks and other folks of color were just not developed. They were underprivileged. They weren't yet professional enough. Under that was a belief not worthy, not deserving yet, but I was going to help them. I was trained as a teacher, and so I was going to help those underprivileged folks. All they had to do was study hard, pull themselves up by their bootstraps, just like I did, that patronizing, condescending attitude. Now, I had some of the language, underprivileged, but I didn't have over. And so the idea that whites are the privileged group, folks of color, indigenous folks, marginalized, I was focused on helping those people of color, not that in order for folks of color, indigenous folks, to be discriminated against and experience racism, then whites have access to far greater power, access, privilege, advantages. And so I was stuck at the individual level, this metaphor that as white allies, we have to be at 3 levels, see people as human beings deserving of what all human beings deserve. I was stuck. I'm a good one. I'm not racist. So therefore, I'll have to be as polite and nice. That's all I needed to do. We have to look at the group level, the pervasive daily microaggressions, racial dynamics that people of color experience every day, and the white privilege that we get, how we are seen and treated. And then at the organizational level, the systemic manifestations of racism, what do I need to do to dismantle and do that? More of what I never realized. And to be honest, just this last year, I've learned so much more about white privilege. You might be familiar with Dr. Peggy McIntosh and so many folks that have written about it. Pages 52 to 55, hot off the press for somebody last week. A list of many more white privileges that I realize I get. Benefit of the doubt, assume smart, competent, access to resources. I'm more promotable. I don't have to prove myself to be considered, whereas folks of color have to prove they can do the job, already be doing it before they might even be considered. But white privilege is also what doesn't happen. I'm not racially profiled, tone policing, overlooked, ignored, under a microscope. One mistake, see, therefore, they just aren't qualified. And again, assume deficit. The other thing about white privilege, it's systemic. My dad was in World War II, GI Bill. He got to get a master's in engineering. He got a low or no rate, low cost loan to buy a home in Cheverly, Maryland, outside of DC, middle class, upper middle class. So the school I went to was financed by lots of taxes. So I got a very different education because of the GI Bill. And in my life, I got a job in leadership development at Colorado State University. I'd never done leadership development, never taught leadership. I'd been in residence life. I read a book the night before, went, and I was given the job. How much of that was white privilege? and potential because I'm white and seen as competent. If you know Dr. Bettina Love, and if you don't, just Google, it's a wonderful piece talking about that white privilege is like a debit card, that we just keep getting all these privileges and benefits, it keeps getting refilled. And so even when we step up, and speak, we're not losing anything because we're going to just keep getting treated with white privilege. So breathe. This one was the hardest one, and I'm still learning. Tema Okun has some work on white supremacy culture. There have been so many people talking about whiteness. I just saw Sonia Renee Taylor, an Instagram of her talking about how whiteness is like water. And when you're around water all the time and that's all you know, you're swim, then you think you need it. And until you get to the edge, that was a new piece for me, until you swim and you get to the edge of water and you realize there's land, there's air, there's all other things, that maybe there's a way to have all of it, new ways, other ways to value, and not just white culture. When we say that we're the way we believe that makes us most comfortable, and the way that white culture, Anglo white culture, the standard, the norm, how you dress, communicate, these rules about how to do conflict, top-down decision-making, how you can be emotional or not. My box is about this big to fit in as a white woman. Folks of color is so much. So even the rules of white culture are disproportionately enforced with folks of color to keep whites comfortable, to keep us in charge, have our needs met, people of color serving us and keeping the systems of racism and white supremacy culture alive. And so this call for renewed focus on dismantling racism at all levels, individuals, cultural, systemic, societal. And so what is anti-racism? Many whites that I've worked with over the decades will just say, I'm not racist, I'm non-racist, I don't do anything intentionally. I'm realizing more and more, as Dr. Pettit reminded me of, Dr. Beverly Tatum wrote decades ago, that you're either actively committed and actively working to dismantle racism, to create racially inclusive organizations, to be anti-racist, or you're not. And Dr. Ibram X. Kendi has been talking about that concept and many others these days. So you're colluding with, you're silenced, not speaking up, supporting the racist status quo, thinking that's how we always do things, passively, unintentionally, policies, practices that you're perpetuating. And some on our campuses are actively, intentionally saying, doing things, making policies that perpetuate racism. That harsh reality we have to live into is, what is my part? What have I done? And I have to start to question everything. So a white ally, a co-conspirator, as Dr. Bettina Love talks about, we speak up, we speak out, we put skin in the game. We use our white privilege to partner with folks of color, follow their leadership, to name racist dynamics, interpersonal dynamic. And in the packet, I think 37 to 46, I have a lot of tools there. Ask about policies, practices, services, and say, can we use a race lens to analyze unintentionally how it might privilege whites and not meet the needs of folks of color, indigenous folk? And when you are making new policies, you're saying, before we get too far, let's put a race lens on this. Who's getting served, who's not, whose voices do we need, what data do we need to look at, and always in partnership and solidarity and accountability with folks of color, following the leadership thereof. So if you're wondering, now what? The white person, where do I start? I get in touch with your passion. What's your big why? Your university's made a very clear commitment, but what is yours? What's your level of resolve and commitment to take meaningful action each and every day? Not just to help people fit in, assimilate, but to dismantle and rebuild so folks of color thrive and succeed without the artificial barriers and discrimination and racism, and whites can thrive and succeed on their own, not with the artificial advantages of white privilege. Fair, equitable playing field where everyone can contribute fully and really serve the students, faculty, and staff we're with. However, when I started getting less white privilege and access, and I think many whites do, it can feel like I'm losing something, and people might say it's reverse racism or you're oppressing whites. So get that passion. What are you committed to? And make it a daily practice. Every morning, maybe while you're brushing your teeth, reground, commit. The principles of community at UCSD are some wonderful places to start to say why we're doing this. Use it as your true north, your compass. And the people you work with talk about passion, vision, and then what are we going to do? I love this Malcolm X. We can't teach what we don't know. We can't lead where we won't go. Just breathe that in. Because where we have to work as whites is self-work and healing from internalized dominance. meaning that white supremacy, those beliefs that whites are better and smarter, folks of color are deficit and need our help to just maybe become professional and fit in. So we have to start with ourselves, because most of us have decades of racialized socialization and these racist beliefs. And so we need awareness. So pages 30 to 33, common racist attitudes. There's a bunch of microaggressions on 19 to 28, can help raise awareness to unlearn, unprogram, relearn, and as I'm feeling since George Floyd's murder, deep humility of what I don't know and what I'm on a fast track, hopefully, to learn, to recognize where I'm not competent yet, where I'm incompetent, that I'll never get there, and that folks of color are far more competent about inclusion, equity, and racism than I am. A model by Drs. Darold and David Sue you might be very familiar with. And so the work that y'all did in a 24-day challenge does a lot around knowledge, terms and history, stats, current dynamics, critical and not sufficient. So in your teams, your divisions, really get grounded. But the work of white allies, whether it's in white accountability groups, other kind of anti-racism group, is really racialized socialization, what are racist biases among whites, and then what do I still hold and how do I dismantle them in the moment, and what racist behaviors have I done? How do I interrupt before I do? Having real practice to recognize all the interpersonal systemic dynamics that perpetuate racism, white supremacy culture, and how do you interrupt it in the moment? Practice it, not just cognitively, but practice it. And then the action, building it into your structures, your accountability. That's what's impressive about your strategic plan for inclusive excellence. The EDI best practices is there are now tools, ways to do it, and accountability structures to support folks getting these competencies and putting them into practice. So what are some other tools? Lots. But if you just look at pages 6 to 14, I think there's 96 competencies. I got it down to 10. But I think we whites have a long way to go. So what you can start doing is talk about your vision, the compelling case for change, leadership case, and your level of resolve. I'm not doing any work in organizations until top leaders talk about their level of resolve to stay in the conversation. The skills to notice group dynamics with a race lens, organizational culture, and really understand and have conversations and stay in the conversations. Skill to ask questions, speak up, acknowledge, agree, and really amplify, use your white privilege, amplify the voices of folk of color. You may not be the first to notice it, but be the second, the third, or the fourth, so that leaders shift and change to really start addressing dynamics in the moment as well as practices. And then really stay engaged. White fragility, whenever it gets uncomfortable, we often want to leave. Stay engaged, truth-telling, those courageous conversations that Dr. Pettit was talking about for our collective liberation. And finally, in this one, those racist micro interpersonal aggressions, skills to interrupt every single one. Where you can start is get more people revising policies and practices. Now, they're not ready to, but they can start. By the way, on the cover of the packet, I think I have 4 or 5 webinars, and one is using an inclusion lens, lots of tools and strategies and handouts. That is a critical skill that people can start doing reactively and proactively as you're planning to look at all decisions. Nothing gets decided without a race lens and anti-racist lens. And then clear competencies. I'm challenging leaders since George Floyd's murder. What are the competencies you will require of all leaders, faculty, staff, students, and then build that into accountability processes. That in itself will create change. Whether it's hiring, performance management, supervision, all policies and practices, really analyzing and building in accountability, one-on-one supervision, team, as well as the performance. And finally, we have to keep deepening our skills. It's lifelong learning and unlearning. And too often, I want to think success will be okay. Now that I've said I'm a white ally, but the one on the right, what it really looks like has been much more. And particularly these last 6 months, I have faced what I don't know, particularly about how white supremacy and racism, the through line from 1500s till now, morphed, maybe looks a little different, but through lines. And I just have so much more to learn about history and how it's still showing up today. There are a lot of potholes. White allies, I've done all these plus more in the packet. That white savior, come in, I'm here to fix, I know best, distancing ourselves from other whites. I've competed to be the best white, I'm the good one, I'm better than you. One of those games is find the racists in the room and pile on, as opposed to relating and connecting and out of compassion and accountability, moving other whites to move, have access to training and resources that you've had. Notice when you have white fragility and you've got that PLE, perfectly logical explanation. I fall into that social justice elitism, critiquing other whites. Again, that's part of the I'm the better one. Stuck in our heads, that's a huge trap for folks in academia, especially if you teach about anti-racism. To know a lot does not mean we put it in our practice every single day, as the president asked today for us to do. Moving to solutions and thinking we have them instead of collaborative decision making. All talk, no action, not about you, but students are done. Staff and faculty of color are done with more statements. They want action and meaningful action. As white allies and change agents, you can be a part of meaningful, real action and partnership. And then don't drop out, because this is not always easy. It may get hard. And as Dr. Maya Angelou, do the best you can till you know better. And when you know better, you can do better. Just breathe. Lifelong process. So lead from where you are. Lead up, lead out, lead down, speak up, get more whites involved, lead with your strengths. So if you're in IT or accounts payable or policy or advising, supervision, res life, teaching, faculty, lead where you are, get others involved, and then ask, what more could I be doing? And what do I need to stop doing? And do that in white accountability spaces, learning communities together. If you get tired, take a break, maybe a weekend, but come back, re-energized, recommitted to the work of anti-racism. And please don't use self-care, community care as a reason to drop out. Use it to stay in it for the long haul, because folks of color have been in it for decades that you're working with. I've heard a lot in the last week or so about unity and coming together. And I had all kinds of feelings about it. And then I decided to reclaim those words. I challenge all of us, white allies, change agent leaders, to unify, to dismantle, eradicate racism, white supremacy beliefs in all of our structures and practices and ourselves, and come together with other whites to truly create racial justice, anti-racism, liberation in everything we do. I hope you got to be on an inauguration night, that evening program, and you might have seen Dolores Huerta gave me joy. And I know this much, but I know I've heard her speak. Every moment is an organizing opportunity. Every person a potential activist. Every moment a chance to change the world. Every white person a potential ally, change agent. If we partner with, learn with, not I'm better than, but really relate in, and what can we do together? I hope you realize leadership matters. Your leadership matters. And I hope you choose courage, collaborative leadership as you move into this moment, partnering with folk of color to deep transformational change and move to be much more of an anti-racist organization there at UCSD. I thank you for having me be able to collect and share some of my current thoughts.
My, Dr. Kathy Obear, we are so honored and blessed to have you with us today to talk about some difficult things: dismantling racism, creating a more racially just campus environments. I loved your exhortation about skin in the game and encouraging us to lead from where we are. The part that I really love, because we have an investment in EDI, and this is collaborating and following the leadership of persons of color. That's hard to do in our society that doesn't necessarily affirm that, or higher education. And the reminder to breathe. Thank you for that. And taking meaningful action. There's so many areas that you've mentioned here. And now I look forward to facilitating this conversation with Dr. Becky Pettit, who will share with you and I'll ask you a few questions, and she'll share with you in the UC San Diego context what we've been working on, and we have some questions that we would like to pose to you. Dr. Pettit, would you like to start with some general comments about your feedback for Dr. Obear?
Sure. Thank you so much, Kathy, and thanks again to those of you who have joined us today. Many of you know that we have embarked on a campus-wide education, and we are grateful that people were with us on the 21-day anti-racism challenge. And this is, as I said at the beginning, part of our overarching initiative. And toward the end of our seminar, we will share more about our white allyship and white accountability initiative. But for now, I'll stay with that and invite your questions.
Awesome. So this will be a conversation for this portion. We'll just letting the audience know we'll have about a 20-minute conversation between VC Pettit and Dr. Obear, our special guest. I have a few questions, and as they say on SNL, talk amongst yourselves. And after that 20-minute time, we will be happy to take your questions from the audience. We go until 2:15, so thank you for being with us and staying with us through this wonderful conversation. Dr. Obear and Dr. Pettit, first question. What are some common behaviors and actions of white leaders and employees that are somewhat troublesome or give you concern? And could you point somewhere in your framework, Dr. Obear, things that we can bring up and say to respond to some of those kinds of concerns or problematic behaviors?
Not my problem. I'm sorry, Dr. Pettit, you were going.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Not my problem. It's someone else's responsibility. It's EDI's responsibility. That is their job, right? And I think also people get paralyzed because there is so much to do. The issue is so big that they don't know where to start.
And so many whites like me were trained not to be full body, just to be in our heads. And so much of this work is unpacking some of those emotions, socialization, and learning new skills. And I don't know about you all, but as I'm in my 60s, it's hard for me to admit I'm not very competent. And so to be able to be in a learning organization to say, self-assessment for white allies, these are some competencies I'm pretty good in, but these are some I need. Collect up, maybe jot form everybody in your unit, plan professional development. And then in the packet, there were all those skills. So when people say racist comments like, can't they pull themselves by their bootstraps, and we are over focusing these special privileges, and what about queer issues, and why do we always focus on race, and you're just always playing the race card. I could keep going, but those daily racist aggressions that happen, or they're not the right fit, or we actually want people from really elite backgrounds and their research is outside the boundaries of, so being able to hear those coded racist messages, what neighborhood are they going to, and skill up to be able to intervene. Most whites are in the bleachers. I know I was. And even if they think they're on the team on the sidelines, we're not in the game. And so to be our capacity to just get out there and try it. One more quick one is I have to be perfect. I'm afraid if I say something wrong, I'll be called out in this cancel culture and it'll ruin my career. Well, learning community, create that in your organization. And folks of color haven't even made mistakes, quote, and that has deeply impacted their career. And so we have to have the courage to really change the climate and the culture, policies, practices.
I want to remind folks that the packet that Dr. Obear is referring to was dropped in the chat. I don't know if folks joined us after we posted that, so maybe we'll post it there again.
Great. So for both of you, I appreciate the quotes and the specific statements people might make. I imagine people are on the call or listening in or watching us thinking, so what can I do? What does that actually look like to respond, to lead, to collaborate, and to be an ally for real in terms of concrete behavioral norms and new practices?
So what I appreciate about the way we have approached our work here is that we have established shared agreements, our principles of community, right? That's something we came to together as a group, something we commit to live by, and embodied in our principles of community are issues of respect, of inclusion, right? And so our work is to continue to demonstrate that, to live that, to have it not just be a statement that we refer to and hold out, but what does it look like to show up as a respectful colleague? And I think being in communication frequently, right? Asking different groups, how can I be of support? How can I partner with you, right? Rather than sitting back and trying to be perfect and being afraid to make mistakes. So Kathy, I'll turn to you.
I love all that. And, you know, you probably have data and user data, you segregate by race, but I love the partnering with what do we do that helps dismantle racism? Again, asking students, staff, and faculty who you serve, what else do you think we need to be doing, and then doing it. And I love the systemic work you all are doing. What I find the challenge is you get to a certain place, and if the leaders and managers aren't implementing, and so if you have any positional power, getting your team talking about what's the vision, what's our passion, how close are we 0 to 10 to manifesting anti-racism, how do we know, getting into the data, and then developing, as you said, Dr. Pettit, the team. How inclusive are we in our team dynamics? Because we can say we're this, but if I'm interrupting Dr. Pettit all the time, or if I'm taking Dr. Forbes Bethude's ideas and presenting them as my own. So in the packet, there are all kinds of very common unproductive racist dynamics that happen at the team level. What is our professional development based on clear required accountabilities? And that is a huge step. And I don't know if the system is ready for that, but can they, Dr. Pettit, within their unit, identify 5 capacities they want everyone to develop?
Absolutely. That's the strategy that we are encouraging and promoting through our strategic plan for inclusive excellence that you referenced before. So we have established some centralized core tenets, but we ask that every unit, every department contextualize and personalize it, and for every unit to develop their own strategic plan, their own strategy, their own diversity committees, to talk about what equity, diversity, and inclusion looks like within their own units.
And, you know, when I was on those kind of committees, I had not done my self work. And so it was almost like a badge I wore. And then I showed up dominating, interrupting, thinking I was right. And so would also add to that, that all those committees, unit change teams, working groups that are going to just look at hiring and analyze it with a race lens is maybe another. How we do onboarding, you know, 6-8 sessions to do that kind of quick analyze, do some changes, and then keep going. Adding the competencies, recognize racist microaggressions, interrupt them, talk about the vision and the passion and why we're doing this, a leadership case, that we expect leaders to do it. And there's materials in the packet that highlight some of those, trying to take 96 down to 5. But so many, I believe, of us whites jump into the work before the capacities are clear. And one other quick thing, until I'm measured and held accountable, and I won't get promoted or be able to get stretch opportunities if I don't demonstrate racial competence, dismantling racism competence, many whites may not care about this enough to have race centered in everything they do.
Thank
in
you.
my experience.
Yeah, thank you.
So great recommendation to tie that to evaluations, or at least how we think about competence in the professional setting. Food for thought. Let's turn now to talk about resistance. So this is your squiggly line, Dr. Obear, that success isn't that straight arrow, right? It's a little squiggly, it can be messy. So the questions around these for both of you are, what are some of the common dynamics of resistance? So in addition to some of the statements and quotes that we mentioned, the dynamics that may happen in groups or across the institution, and what are ways that you have engaged and positively worked to minimize this, both at the individual level all the way through the institutional level? Over to you both.
Right, so I think higher education, when we talk about resistance in this context, one of the things I often hear is that diversity and excellence are mutually exclusive. Folks don't see how that goes hand in hand. And there are strategies that people employ when we are talking about diversifying our environment or about pursuing inclusion by some of the standards that Dr. Obear said before. I don't know if they just quite fit. I don't know if they come from the right kind of institution. And I think it's important to move in. when we notice and see and encounter resistance, to engage it, to not pretend that it's not there, to not just fight against it, but to move in and understand what is underneath that. And often it's fear, as Dr. Obear said, fear of losing something, fear of losing status, and the realization that, you know, that white supremacy is a lie, right? So coming to terms with that and realizing that, you know, somebody has been taught what excellence is and having to accept that it's much broader than that, that can be traumatizing for some folks.
I thought I was top of my class because I was smart. I didn't realize that the GREs, SATs, and the how I was taught in private college and high school actually fit into how I learned. And that is a very narrow. So another place of resistance is, this is how we've done it. This is what excellence look. This is rigorous. We can't lower standards. So hear those racist coded words. And then to be asking the questions, well, what do you mean by rigor? And what do you mean by standards? And what are the capacities we really want and the competencies? And how do you know that this person has it because they went to this elite school and this person does it because they went to CSU Fullerton? So a strategy might also be, can we all, and you say this task force, can we all just go research 2 or 3 other places and come back to see what are our peer and aspiring institutions doing? We're doing great work here, but go see what they're doing in your division and come back. Because engaging resistance might be, you know, I'm exhausted, there's not much more we can do. And then to see how much more has been done other places, or even cross-fertilizing. And that's, Dr. Pettit, that's built into the assessment process and accountability process you have, sharing strategies publicly with other key leaders helps to realize you may not personally be committed, but your peers are seeing how far you've come and how far you haven't. A lot of other things to listen for is we need another survey. We have to study this. And yeah, you're laughing. I get to campuses where there's
yes, always more data. More data. We need to study this a little bit more. We just don't know enough when we have so much data already that, you know, informs our work if we should only use it, right? Yes, absolutely. I just needed to chime in and say amen.
I love to go back and forth. Budgeting. Well, we don't have the money for it. Oh, we have another crisis. And so it gets pushed off. And you really hear resistance behind closed doors when white leaders particularly, and maybe 1 or 2 folk of color leaders who are colluding because they have to survive or they have been ingrained with the same racist attitudes. I'm not saying folks of color are racist. I'm saying some folks of color may also be perpetuating. So behind closed doors, that's when you really hear, it's like, well, Dr. Pettit, yeah, the chancellor said this, but what do we really have to do? How little can we do? And I'm not sure people are that blatant, but that's the message. What do we need to do? And it's this energy of being forced to do it.
Thank you. Great reflections. And it does emphasize the importance of courage and stepping out there. I really appreciate the language of leadership and confronting the changes that we want to see. All right, we are going to be bringing this part to a close soon. So I think 1 to 2 more questions, Dr. Obear and Dr. Pettit, and then we will turn it to our audience. Many good questions coming in. So just letting the audience know we will get to them shortly. Thanks for that discussion on resistance. Let's continue to explore the UC San Diego context. And I'll turn it to VC Pettit to discuss some of the initiatives that we've had on campus. Dr. Obear, you're quite aware of some of them, but just for the audience logging in, we have over 500 persons who are really interested in this. To say a few words, we've heard about the strategic planning process and accountability, about the 21-day challenge, if people are just joining us or new to this, the White Allyship Initiative that we hope to launch shortly after this conversation, and other initiatives that we're working on campus. And Dr. Obear, we would love to hear your reflections on those initiatives, as well as from your expert perspective, what's next? Dr. Pettit.
Right. So we are going to stay here for a while. I think what happens often is institutions create initiative after initiative after initiative and don't really dive deep and take the time to really build skill for people to apply the learning. So what we heard after the 21-day challenge quite frequently is that those were the seminars, those were rich opportunities for learning, for listening to the discussants, but what do I do next? So the next piece of work is really, how do we implement what we have learned? And really challenging us and stretching us to apply the learning in our own environment. The next big initiative, however, is the one we are talking about today, our White Allyship and our White Accountability Initiative. So we will be bringing in cohorts of individuals, sharing tools, and asking individuals to apply the learning in their own units. I also want to make folks aware of another faculty initiative. Let me see if I can remember, the Coalition of Aspiring Male Allies, that will be rolling out soon. This is where we are bringing in senior male faculty to help build skill in being a male ally for women and for faculty of color as well. So I'll stop at that. Diane, were there other initiatives you wanted me to touch on? That I really want to highlight those two.
Those were the main ones. We've offered workshops and sessions for faculty and staff of color, but in terms of White Allyship, those were the main ones. So Dr. Obear, your reflections and things that you might recommend for next step.
Before Kathy goes in, sorry to interrupt, I also want to take a moment to acknowledge learning opportunities that may emerge as a result of responding to the demands of our Black students. So I want to, if any of our Black students are out there listening, I want to say thank you. It is my job as Chief Diversity Officer to keep equity, diversity, and inclusion a high priority in everything that we do. And I also welcome being challenged. I also welcome our Black students saying, we want these particular things prioritized. We understand you are saying these words and you are doing these things, but we are not feeling and seeing the fruits of that. So stay tuned for our taking some guidance and some leadership from our Black students. We've also heard from our Black staff and faculty. So we have some things planned and we will continue to move forward in partnership with our constituents. Kathy, sorry, go ahead.
Well, building on what you said, Black staff and faculty are probably saying to whoever is there as administrator leaders, yeah, you're saying it, you're doing some things, but we're not feeling it in the day-to-day. And so the deep unlearning and relearning of skill development of leaders is critical, and in white accountability groups, and doing it within the division might be a step, and that this is our work. This is not something, this is leadership, and we have to embed in everything we do. I mentioned unit change teams, the idea of whether you call it a diversity council, but this is an anti-racist team that's coming together, and not emotional labor on the folk of color, indigenous folks. It's a lot of the work of whites, to what, looking at practices, policies, data, but build that in. I don't care how small your department is, even if it's 8 people, 4 people can come together and have that structure. The other thought is you have about 500 folks, advocates, leading advocates.
Advocates and influencers.
And influencers.
And some folks are like, ooh, how do I get to be that? They have gotten some ongoing training, they come together. That same model within a division, within a department, within our finance administration, how do we have influence and advocates that come together, learning together and strategizing so they can help co-lead some of these unit change team working groups. So it's those structures at different levels to analyze policies, practices, culture, climate, look at data, so that in professional development, it's not just a check off, as you said, Dr. Pettit, this is a long-term culture change process, not just the next flavor of the month.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, so we have a few questions, and Thanks to our team helping us to sort through these, and thank you to all of you who are submitting questions. I'm going to start with a question that's addressed to both Dr. Obear and Dr. Pettit. And the question is, what advice can Dr. Obear and Dr. Pettit give to those of us who want to push our work further towards anti-racism / dismantling racism without pushing potential partners too far and losing the opportunity? It's two-part, so take notes on that one. And the second part, there's more. UC San Diego is fairly racially diverse, but racism, and specifically anti-Black racism, is still present throughout. What is the responsibility, or how does this work look for non-white people of color who also access and sometimes benefit from whiteness and white supremacy? Ooh, there's more. I'm happy to break it up for later. I didn't realize it was this long. What are some strategies for allies to combat the quote, white savior, unquote, complex if they recognize it in themselves or others? The first part is, though, how can we push our work further towards anti-racism without pushing potential partners too far or losing the opportunity? So I hear a question around moderation and concern about relationship too. Thoughts?
Kathy, you want to go first?
Ground everything in the strategic plan and the vision of anti-racism that your top leadership have said, this is where we're going. Ground everything in inclusive excellence so that your partners see this isn't an add-on or nice thing to do, and then begin to ask, how are we already, so play to strengths, how are we already creating racial equity inclusion? What does our data say about closing the education gap, access gap, quality, and the surveys, staff, faculty, what do they say about our climate? And where do you want it to be? And so if you get people talking about their passion, their vision, their racialized journey, and why they're committed, your partners get their emotions, their full bodies going, and then begin to see where we want to be and where we are. No blame, no shame, no foul, but how do we then empower, mobilize all, accountability for all? I'll start there.
And to that, I would simply add, also consider starting with allies, right? There's always someone else in your organization or in an adjacent organization that can join you. So beginning with activating other people of goodwill and inviting them in.
And to build, let's say in your direct line of leadership, you don't see an ally. What do you think of this, Dr. Pettit? Maybe over here, there's someone at their peer, because what you're seeing, they're seeing, and probably even more. And so how do you ask people who have more positional power and that are white to do peer-to-peer, use some of their white privilege relationship, whatever, to invest and go, hello, accountability is love. Confrontation is love. When whites hold me accountable, they're saying, Kathy, I believe you can do better, and I'm investing in you. Now, it may not feel like it in the moment, but we have to not leave anyone behind and support other whites to learn and grow and hold them to a higher standard than they currently are.
Great. And then the second part, thank you both. The second part of that question is that although UC San Diego is fairly racially diverse, anti-Black racism is still present. So part of that question was around the work or the relationship of non-white people of color who have access or sometimes benefit from whiteness and white supremacy, and what are the strategies we might use to combat that or speak to that?
Yes, I think that is a very important point. And I think we are attempting to address this through campus-wide education. So when we did the 21-day anti-racism challenge, there were other, we brought in literature and issues of non-white, non-Black colleagues who also benefit from whiteness and to enact that as well. So our own learning is important.
Many organizations, as you know, and you might have Black, Indigenous, other folk of color, full groups, staff, faculty to come together, support. And in these days, some folks are doing, and let's break into sub-racialized, minoritized groups too, talk about the racism we experience as Asian American Pacific Islanders, Latinx folks, Indigenous, multiracial, Middle Eastern, Arab, Black, and then to say, and how does colorism, anti-Blackness, so I could be wrong, Dr. Pettit, but colorism might be a way in for non-Black folk of color to be able to talk about the pain in their families, the pain in the communities, how we whites, given white supremacy, racism, take lighter skinned folk of color, more intelligent, smarter, position you all to be the buffer, how white supremacy has put Asian Americans, especially East Asian. So just to have those conversations, painful, and then to have the conversation, how is anti-Blackness showing up here in the Latinx community on this campus? How is it showing up in the Asian American Pacific Islander community? How is it showing up in multiracial? Because there's probably lots of colorism going. So, and I could keep going. So hard conversations. And how is anti-race, anti-Blackness showing up within the Black community? Not only colorism, but those internalized racist anti-Black beliefs. So painful racial trauma healing, that the space needs to be on campus and on work time and supported with resources and possibly facilitators if asked for. And it's just deep healing work. Parallel work as we whites are doing our racial healing work around internalized dominant superiority. And then bring everybody, folk of color, just back together to have those conversations. So learning communities that have enough representation to do small group work and come back. That's what we do at the Social Justice Training Institute and Dr. Pettit. That's when we first met 22 years ago. I don't think, right, in 1998. Oh my God.
Don't date us. Don't date us.
Way back. Wow.
It was a while ago.
And over the years, my colleagues of color just have developed incredible capacities for healing within similar racialized, minoritized groups and then come together for cross-race, horizontal oppression, healing and naming. And it's just significant critical work because it's all in reaction to white supremacy and whiteness and racism.
Right, and I'd like to note that our colleagues in our campus resource centers, and in particular our cross-cultural resource center, we're having conversations about this, right? About how all groups can find their voices and understand their role and responsibility in addressing anti-Blackness as well. And in our teaching and learning commons area as well, I might not get this right, but there's anti-racist pedagogy initiative as well, designed for faculty to be thinking about how they can show up in the classroom.
Quick plug, Whiteness in the Classroom is one of my webinars that's free on the packet. Just to add it to.
Awesome. And so thank you both. For our audience, just a few reminders. We have ASL interpreters. You can select that on your screen if you need that. The packet that has been referred to has also been placed in the chat. And Dr. Obear just mentioned Whiteness in the Classroom, one of her resources for training, and everything else that we've been mentioning will be in the chat or will be on our slides later. Question number 2. It often seems that persons who would benefit the most from attending seminars or workshops like these do not attend. My understanding is that when students, faculty, or leaders are, quote, forced, unquote, to attend diversity training, etc., it is not successful in implementing changes. Is there anything you'd suggest to get those who are not interested in participating to actually do so?
So I will say that I am not a fan of mandatory diversity training. I have been one of those trainers on the other end, having to do training with those mandated to attend, and that never goes well. So I encourage leaders to integrate and to infuse the information in their ongoing activities. So on your agenda, your staff agenda coming up, how can you talk about equity, diversity, and inclusion within your department? At your next faculty meeting, how can you talk about equity, diversity, and inclusion in your environment. So it's really infusing it in multiple ways that we are doing our business. So in faculty, staff, and student onboarding, ensuring that we have it there. In our ongoing training and education in our unit, make sure we are talking about equity, diversity, and inclusion there. In your performance evaluation, equity, diversity, that's another opportunity to have that conversation. So I think you get my point here is that we need to do both. We need to have these centralized opportunities for learning, acknowledging that those who want to learn are likely going to be those who show up, but also ensuring that we're including it in our everyday practices and leading by example. Kathy, is there something you'd like to add to that?
That gives the message leadership matters and this is valued, and it's just like budgets. If people weren't good at budgets, how long would they stay in leadership roles? Similar capacity around racial justice, anti-racism. We have to hold it that same level of value, that if you want to be promoted here, if you want to get tenure, if you want to move into stretch, you have to have these competencies. So a couple quick ideas. Can you imagine if we had very clear competencies for each job and say, in general, but say, if you want to be a supervisor, you need to demonstrate these. Here's ways to develop it. Here are some ways, in addition to building it into team meetings. And then for students, a dean of engineering told me one day while I was doing training around racism that they just got off the phone with their biggest employer. And this is a university of 50,000 students at the time. And they said, they just fired us because our engineering students are not leaving with the equity, inclusion, diversity, and racist competencies that they need. So they're not going to hire. So find out what the employers and corporations and grads are asking for. Make sure your faculty know that, and make sure your students know, because we're trying to have folks be career ready, citizenship ready. And then say to faculty, how are you preparing our students to be global citizens with racial consciousness and capacity to really create racial justice, anti-racism, and build it into, as you're doing the curriculum, get it into performance appraisals.
Thank you. Next question is somewhat structural, and it has some behavioral elements as well as some terms that we might be using on campus. So many of us are in units or departments that are top heavy with white people who might be less inclined to think of racism as a problem that they might need to tackle, and where BIPOC people, Black, Indigenous, people of color, or more anti-racist, inclined white people are more recently hired or have less institutional power. What recommendations might you have for organizing in those settings in general? And specifically, what resources might there be at UC San Diego to facilitate these conversations in light of these power differences? So there's a presence element and a structural element. And then this piece is actually about the term anti-racism, which we've been using. Why is the word anti-racism being used now? Are equity, diversity, and inclusion not enough? It's a two-part question.
But let me take the first part about the top-heavy organization, that question. So our strategic plan for inclusive excellence is our institutional strategy to shine a light on these issues. So we share with unit leaders data in terms of presence, who's here and who's not, in terms of attrition. We share climate data, and there are annual accountability meetings where there is transparency, where there is light around this. And leaders have to respond to the diversity or lack thereof, the climate, the ways that they are approaching succession planning and so forth. So we have built the infrastructure to shine light on this. And since we've only had one such accountability meeting, we're going to have another one sometime soon. We're still working on that, finalizing the date. But the hope is that over time, shining light on this and holding unit leaders accountable for progress, we will see some measurable improvement there. Did I answer that part, Diane? The first
Yes,
part?
great. Thank you.
Okay. Kathy, I'll let you answer the one about why we're saying anti-racism now and moving beyond equity, diversity, and inclusion.
So as a white person, when I only had years of diversity, equity, inclusion, race got a footnote. And if folks of color brought it up, we didn't get, but I was not leading. When I'd be in rooms and folks would say, folks of color would raise issues of race, I'd be like, yeah, but I'm a lesbian. And what about? Many white people go to our subordinated when we are being asked as white people to look at white privilege, our collusion, our silence, our complicity. And so in this moment in time, in our 400 years of intentional, deliberate racism, white supremacy, there's a groundswell to maybe we can move in and say, in this moment, can we do some of the work that for centuries we did not? Truth-telling, reckoning, reconciliation, anti-racism. For me, I've been using racial equity, racial inclusion, because that's what I was hearing more folks say. There's something about anti-racism that is ringing in my body. I'm seeing folks of color who are activists and change agents nationally using it. It's naming the reality of what this is. Yes, inclusion, equity, but we're talking about systemic racism, systemic white supremacy, and dismantling. And I'm not sure when we say EDI, white folks particularly hear that. And to be sure, folks of color committed to anti-racism do not hear a commitment to anti-racism when you just say equity, diversity, inclusion. It sounds like whitewashing. I think that was a pun.
Thank you so much. That's very valuable. And I appreciate the historical components that you've discussed earlier, because talking about racism is then also thinking about how our country and our global society has been built. And that's uncomfortable for some. So thank you. Okay, so we have a dynamics related question so people can understand how to interpret what happens in groups and organizations. How do we recognize the difference between resistance and ignorance? And how should resistance be treated differently than lack of awareness?
I will start and return to the point I made earlier about how we engage what looks like resistance is to move in. We won't know if it is resistance or if it's ignorance until we get into dialogue and communication with the individual. And I think the strategy around listening and then understanding either the ignorance or the root of the resistance, that will help us determine what strategy or what intervention we might need to employ. So I think you have to really not make assumptions about is it ignorance or is it resistance, and approach the individuals, understand where they're coming from. Kathy, do you have a different thought about that?
Just to keep building. And as white folks, to relate in, to see ourselves in other whites, not go into judgment, I'm better than, but to think, wow, when did I just say colorblind? Or how do I still believe that folks of color just have to work harder? And so whatever the comment resistance practices is, when did I teach leadership all white male authors, right? So how am I just like that person? And then say, to your point, tell me more, lots of handout resources here. Help me understand, I relate, and you know, someone just told me something that I wonder if you'd be interested in hearing. So almost not quite ask permission, but offer, so that folks say, well, yeah, or say, you know, I just said that same thing last week, and here's what somebody whispered in my ear, and I was so glad they did. So what you used to be like, how you learned a little bit more, and then what you're like now. It's a 12-step from the podium. And so joining with other whites to support their growth as people of color, Indigenous folks and whites have supported you in your growth with grace, compassion, accountability, deep listening. And here's something else to think about. Here are resources. My books are free on my website. So I have to say, but I'm not racist. Tools for well-meaning whites and folk of color say they found it useful to read parts. There's individual, social, systemic work, short read. I hear it's quick, but there's so much out there to continue doing readings within your group. Watch videos. Oh, American Skin on Prime. My colleague, Reverend Dr. Jamie Washington, 2 nights ago, watch this now. And whenever Reverend Doctor says that, we turned off something, hour and a half, we watched it. Phenomenal and very difficult, challenging, but current, looking at the racism and white supremacy within policing. And so highly recommend American Skin.
American Skin, Amazon Prime, and But I'm Not a Racist by Kathy Obear. Those will be in the chat, or if you're listening in, Google it and proceed. Final question in our final minutes for today. How do you recommend student leaders address, quote, reverse racism, quote, allegations among their white peers when in conversations about race? How do you acknowledge people's feelings while also encouraging them to self-reflect on their part in the larger issue of racism?
Kathy, I'll let you start.
Often whites, when they say reverse racism, then they say, well, tell me more, and what examples have you experienced? They're often at the individual level. Remember the trifocals metaphor? Individual, group, organization. So many whites have stories. I was called this name, this happened to me. And so if there was any emotional trauma involved, having the space to be heard and acknowledged, and to then ask, well, how often do those dynamics happen to whites? And what do you know about the daily experiences of folk of color? No one deserves those kind of interpersonal aggressions, name calling, bullying, whatever it is. And trying to help raise awareness of how often at the group level, folks of color, indigenous folks, just inundated, daily, cumulative impact. And then student leaders might be willing to look at organizational level to scan their readings and who are the authors, scan the videos they're asked to read, who are their professors, who's full professors and tenure, to get them into the detail of representation, and a whole list of microaggressions that happen at UCSD, if that data is available, to really see that the people they care about and their student group and their student organization, their residence hall, their classroom, daily barrage of racism that most whites are unaware of and I'm still learning about.
I think Kathy dropped the mic on that one.
Okay.
Great job. That was a really comprehensive answer. Thank you. So in the interest of time, do we end right at 2:15, Diane?
Pretty much. So I am going to help to bring us to a close. So as we approach the end of this final webinar, I would like to share some ways in which we can continue the momentum. Certainly thanking Dr. Kathy Obear for this amazing and stimulating conversation. Our work continues. So if you think through all the things you've heard today from Dr. Obear and VC Pettit, you can certainly see a number of ways and continue working with us at diversity.ucsd.edu. That should be in the chat. And there are a number of professional development resources, previous events that we've had. The recording of the 21-day webinar is there, and readings and other podcasts. We will have some resources. We have some resources now available to further your work in these areas. diversity.ucsd.edu. And good news, we will be having Dr. Kathy Obear back to join us for webinar part 2, Dismantling Racism and Creating Racially Just Campus Environments at UC San Diego. And additional information should be available quite shortly. Immediately after this webinar, you will be directed to a survey when leaving the meeting. We appreciate your taking the time to provide feedback. It will inform how we go about organizing and putting together part 2 when Dr. Obear will join us again with VC Pettit. A recording of this webinar will be posted on our website in the coming days at diversity.ucsd.edu. We look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you for joining us. Please be in touch at diversity ucsd.edu. We look forward to talking with you and hearing your feedback and questions. Thank you again. Thank you, Dr. Obear, VC Pettit. It was a fantastic time. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.